There's a fentanyl deal going down today. A place called the Zone of Death.
Rough terrain, two violent gangs.
Let your training day begin.
This unit was forged in the fire.
Marshals, a new era of Yellowstone.
The trailer for Marshals Episode 2 just dropped, and if you thought the first episode was intense, what's coming next looks even more dangerous, emotional, and unpredictable. The mission is bigger, the enemies are more powerful, and Casey is about to face a situation that could push him further than ever before. In the trailer, we see glimpses of drug cartels, high-speed chases, tense confrontations, and a team that is still trying to learn how to trust each other in the middle of chaos. But the most interesting part is not just the action. It is the growing pressure on Casey, the secrets hidden within the Marshals team, and the possibility that this new war may be far more complicated than it first appears. So let's take a closer look at everything the trailer showed us and why Episode 2 might completely change the direction of this series. One of the biggest things the trailer makes clear is that Episode 2 will immediately raise the stakes. In the first episode, the series focused mostly on introducing Casey's new life, his emotional pain after Monica's death, and the beginning of his journey with the Marshals team. It was a powerful start that balanced drama and action, but the trailer for Episode 2 shows that the real missions are only just beginning. This time, the Marshals are dealing with something far more dangerous, a powerful drug cartel operating in the region. And from the brief moments we saw in the trailer, this will not be a simple operation. These criminals look organized, heavily armed, and extremely confident. That alone tells us that this mission may push the team into one of their most intense situations yet. What makes this even more interesting is how Casey seems to react to everything happening around him. In the trailer, we can see that he is already acting like the most experienced soldier in the group, carefully analyzing every threat and paying attention to the smallest details. This is exactly what we saw in the first episode as well. Casey is not just someone who reacts quickly in dangerous situations. He is someone who notices things others might completely miss. And that ability could become extremely important in Episode 2, because when dealing with organized crime groups like cartels, even the smallest mistake can have deadly consequences. Another detail that makes the situation even more intense is the speed of the mission itself. The trailer shows moments that suggest the team will be moving quickly from one operation to another. There are hints of surveillance, sudden confrontations, and what appears to be a fast-moving investigation. This suggests that the Marshals may be racing against time to stop something bigger before it happens. And when you combine that kind of urgency with enemies who clearly have resources and power, it creates the perfect setup for an episode filled with suspense. But what truly makes this mission feel important is how it might affect Casey personally. After everything he went through in the first episode, Casey is clearly still dealing with a lot of emotional pain. Monica's death is something that continues to weigh heavily on him, and even though joining the Marshals has given him a purpose again, it does not mean that the pain has disappeared. In fact, it might actually be pushing him to take greater risks. When someone loses the person they love the most, they often stop fearing danger in the same way. And that could make Casey both incredibly effective and incredibly vulnerable at the same time. Another interesting element from the trailer is how the rest of the team seems to be adjusting to Casey's presence. In the first episode, it was clear that everyone was still learning about each other. They were trying to understand how they work, how they think, and whether they can rely on one another in life or death situations. Episode the second of may be the moment when those relationships start to develop more deeply. Because when a team faces a dangerous mission together, that is when trust truly begins to form. At the same time, the trailer also hints that not everything will be simple inside the group. There are small moments that suggest tension, hesitation, and possibly even disagreements about how to handle the mission. And that is actually what makes this team dynamic more realistic and interesting. These are not perfect heroes who instantly trust each other. They are people with different pasts, different experiences, and different ways of approaching danger. As a result, Episode 2 could be the moment when the Marshals team truly starts to define itself. Another character who might become very important in this episode is Andrea. In the first episode, we saw that she had several conversations with Casey, and she quickly became one of the people he seemed most comfortable speaking with. That alone suggests that their connection may continue to grow in the upcoming episode. Sometimes in stories like this, the most important relationships are not the ones that start loudly, but the ones that slowly develop through small conversations and shared experiences. And Andrea feels like exactly that kind of character. Someone who understands Casey's mindset, someone who can challenge him, and someone who might help him stay grounded as the missions become more dangerous. At the same time, the trailer also hints that Pete Calvin may have an even larger role in this episode. In the first episode, we saw a brief but emotional moment when he looked at the photo of his daughter. That moment alone suggested that there is a deep and painful story behind him. Episode 2 might begin to explore that story more clearly. If Pete and Casey start opening up to each other about the losses they have experienced, it could create a powerful emotional bond between them. Two soldiers who have both lost something important often understand each other in ways that no one else can. And that kind of connection could become extremely important as the missions grow more dangerous. All of these elements together suggest that Episode 2 will not just be about action. Yes, there will clearly be intense operations and confrontations with dangerous criminals, but at the same time, the story will likely continue building the emotional depth of the characters. The team will face new threats, new secrets may start to emerge, and Casey will continue trying to find his place in this new chapter of his life. And if the trailer is any indication, this next episode may be the moment when the series truly shows how big and complex this story is going to become. Another detail from the trailer that immediately caught my attention is the growing importance of a character who could completely change the direction of the story. Sometimes in a series like this, a new character appears quietly, without much attention at first. But as the story moves forward, that same character slowly becomes one of the most important pieces of the entire puzzle. And judging by what we saw in the trailer, Episode 2 might introduce exactly that kind of character. The first episode already gave us a glimpse of how the Marshals team works together, but it also showed us that every member of this group has their own past, their own secrets, and their own reasons for doing this dangerous job. Episode 2 seems ready to expand on that idea even further. The trailer suggests that someone new may enter the story in a way that immediately creates tension and curiosity. The way the scenes are presented makes it clear that this character is not just another background figure. Instead, they might have information, connections, or motivations that could influence the entire mission. When dealing with powerful drug cartels, things are rarely simple. These organizations operate through networks of informants, hidden alliances, and people who may not always be who they appear to be. That is why the appearance of a new character at this moment in the story feels very significant. There is always the possibility that this person could be someone trying to help the Marshals from the inside. But at the same time, there is also the possibility that they might bring new problems with them. One of the things that makes the trailer so interesting is how it creates this feeling of uncertainty. You can sense that the team is entering a situation where trust will become extremely important. In operations involving criminal organizations, information is everything. One wrong piece of information can lead the team into a trap, while the right piece of information can save lives. And that is exactly why this mysterious character could end up becoming one of the most important elements of Episode 2. At the same time, this situation could create a fascinating dynamic with Casey. As we saw in the first episode, Casey is someone who reads people very carefully. He notices small details that others overlook, and he often trusts his instincts when something feels wrong. If this new character enters the story with unclear intentions, Casey will likely be the first person to question them, and that could create some very tense moments within the team. But what makes this even more interesting is the possibility that this character might actually connect to the larger criminal network operating in the region. The trailer hints that the cartel problem may be bigger than the Marshals originally expected. If this is true, then the appearance of someone with insider knowledge could either become the team's greatest advantage or their biggest danger. And in stories like this, the most compelling characters are often the ones who live somewhere in the middle between ally and enemy. Someone who has their own goals, their own survival instincts, and their own complicated past. If Episode 2 introduces a character like that, it could add a completely new layer of tension to the series. Another reason this moment feels important is because the Marshals team is still forming its identity. They are still learning how to trust each other, how to communicate under pressure, and how to handle situations where the stakes are incredibly high. Introducing a new character into that fragile balance could easily create conflict within the group. Some members might believe this person can help them, while others may feel that trusting them is too dangerous. And if there is one thing the first episode already proved, it is that this series is not afraid to explore emotional complexity alongside action. The characters are not just fighting criminals. They are also dealing with their own personal struggles, their past traumas, and the constant pressure of living in a world where danger can appear at any moment. Because of that, the introduction of a mysterious new character could become one of the most important turning points in the story. It might reveal hidden connections between different criminal groups, it might expose secrets that the Marshals did not know before, or it might simply force the team to question who they can truly rely on. And when you combine that kind of uncertainty with the already intense situation involving the cartel, the result could be an episode filled with suspense from beginning to end. The action may be bigger, the mission may be more dangerous, but the real tension might come from the simple question that will follow this new character throughout the episode. Can they really be trusted, or are they about to change everything for the Marshals in a way no one expects? Even though Episode 2 will focus heavily on new missions and dangerous enemies, there is one story that will continue to influence everything Casey does, and that is the truth behind Monica's death. In the first episode, we learned that Monica developed cancer because of toxins connected to chemical waste being dumped around the area where she lived. It was a tragic revelation and one that immediately added a deeper emotional layer to Casey's story. But the more you think about it, the more it begins to feel like there may be more to this situation than we currently know. And this is where Episode 2 could start giving us small clues that Monica's death might not be as simple as it first appeared. In many stories like this, a tragic loss often becomes the starting point for a much larger mystery. At first, it seems like an unfortunate accident or a cruel result of circumstances. But as the story continues, new details slowly begin to appear, revealing that powerful people or dangerous organizations may have played a role behind the scenes. When we look closely at the situation surrounding Monica's illness, it is hard not to wonder whether the chemical waste responsible for the toxins is connected to something bigger. The trailer for Episode 2 does not directly show us anything about this storyline, but it does introduce the idea that criminal organizations operating in the region have a significant amount of power and influence. If drug cartels and other criminal groups are active in the same areas where illegal chemical dumping has occurred, there is always the possibility that these events are connected in ways we have not yet discovered. Imagine for a moment that the toxic waste responsible for Monica's illness was not just the result of careless companies or environmental negligence. What if there were powerful groups involved who deliberately ignored the damage being done to the land and the people living there? If that were the case, then Monica's death could eventually become more than just a personal tragedy for Casey. It could become part of a much larger fight against corruption and exploitation. And that possibility would change everything about Casey's journey in this series. Right now, his motivation seems to come from grief, from the loss of someone he loved deeply, and from the desire to protect others from similar pain. But if Casey ever discovers that Monica's death was connected to criminal activities or powerful organizations, his mission could become far more personal and far more intense. At the same time, the emotional impact of Monica's absence will continue to affect Casey's relationship with Tate. In the first episode, we saw that Tate is struggling to deal with the loss of his mother. Losing a parent is one of the most difficult experiences anyone can go through, especially at such a young age. And while Casey is trying to stay strong for his son, it is clear that he is also dealing with his own grief. Episode 2 might begin showing us how both father and son are trying to move forward after such a painful loss. Sometimes grief creates distance between people, especially when they are both trying to protect each other from their own emotions. But other times it becomes something that brings them closer together. The speech Casey gave to Tate at the end of the first episode already suggested that their bond remains strong, even in the middle of their pain. This is why the story of Monica's death will likely remain one of the most important emotional elements in the series. Every mission Casey takes, every dangerous situation he faces, and every decision he makes will be influenced by the memory of the life he lost. In many ways, Monica's presence will still be felt even though she is no longer physically part of the story. Another interesting possibility is that characters like Thomas Rainwater could eventually help Casey see the bigger picture surrounding these events. Thomas has always been someone who understands the long history of the land, the struggles faced by the Native American community, and the powerful forces that often operate quietly behind major conflicts. If there truly is a deeper story connected to environmental damage and corruption, Thomas might be one of the first people to recognize it. And if that happens, Casey could find himself fighting not only against criminals like drug cartels, but also against systems that have been harming people for years without being challenged. That kind of storyline would give the series a powerful emotional and social dimension, turning Casey's personal tragedy into a larger battle for justice. For now, we only have the information given in the first episode, but the way the story introduced Monica's illness feels very deliberate. It feels like something that could return later with new details and surprising revelations. Episode the second of may not reveal the entire truth yet, but it could start planting the seeds for a storyline that becomes incredibly important as the series continues. Because sometimes the most powerful stories begin with a single loss. And as Casey continues moving forward in this dangerous new chapter of his life, the truth behind Monica's death may eventually become one of the biggest mysteries he has to face. Another very important thing the Marshals Episode 2 trailer hints at is the growing pressure that Casey will face as the missions become more dangerous. In the first episode, we mostly saw Casey stepping back into action after a long and painful period in his life. At first, he did not want to return to that world of violence and constant danger. But as soon as he joined the Marshals team, it became clear that his instincts, intelligence, and experience were still as sharp as ever. Now in episode 2, the trailer suggests that Casey will have to prove himself even more as the team begins dealing with threats that are far bigger than anything we saw in the first episode. One of the most interesting details is how the team appears to rely on Casey's judgment during critical moments. When dealing with powerful criminal organizations like drug cartels, every decision can have serious consequences. One wrong move could lead to an ambush, innocent people getting hurt, or the suspects escaping completely. That kind of pressure requires someone who can stay calm and focused, even when everything around them is chaotic. And Casey has already shown that he is exactly that kind of person. But being the one others rely on is not always easy. Leadership often comes with an enormous emotional weight, especially for someone who is still carrying deep personal grief. Casey is trying to move forward after losing Monica, while at the same time stepping into situations where he must protect his team and complete dangerous missions. That balance between personal pain and professional responsibility could become one of the most powerful elements of episode 2. At the same time, the trailer hints that the Marshals team itself is still evolving. They are beginning to understand each other's strengths and weaknesses, but they have not yet reached the level of trust that experienced teams usually have. Episode the 2nd of May be the moment when that trust truly starts to form. When people face dangerous situations together, they quickly learn who they can depend on and who will stand beside them when things become difficult. Miles, for example, still feels like a character whose story has not yet been fully revealed. In the first episode, there were small hints that he may be carrying emotional scars from his past. Sometimes the quietest characters end up having the most powerful stories behind them. Episode 2 might begin showing us what drives Miles and why he chose to become part of such a risky profession. Belle is another character who could become very interesting as the team dynamic develops. She seems to have a personality that can shift between seriousness and humor, which can be extremely important in a high-pressure environment. Teams that work in dangerous situations often rely on people who can lighten the atmosphere during stressful moments while still remaining focused when the mission requires it. If Belle continues to show that balance, she could become one of the most important emotional supports within the group. And then there is Pete Calvin, who might play an even bigger role in the upcoming episode. In the first episode, we saw that Pete shares a long history with Casey, going back to their time in the Navy SEALs. That kind of shared past creates a bond that is difficult to break. But we also saw a brief moment that hinted at Pete's personal pain when he looked at the photo of his daughter. Episode 2 could begin revealing more about that story. If Pete has experienced a loss similar to Casey's, it would explain why he understands Casey so well and why he wanted him to join the Marshals in the first place. Sometimes people who have suffered similar tragedies find strength in working together toward a common purpose. Protecting others becomes a way to cope with the pain of what they have lost. Another thing that makes the trailer exciting is the sense that the Marshals are entering a much larger conflict than they originally expected. Drug cartels are not simple criminal groups. They operate through complex networks, hidden connections, and large amounts of money and influence. Taking down even a small part of that system can be extremely difficult. That means the mission in episode 2 might only be the beginning of a much bigger battle. The Marshals could discover that the cartel presence in the region is stronger than anyone realized. And if that happens, Casey and the team may find themselves facing enemies who are prepared to fight back with everything they have. This is exactly what makes the upcoming episode feel so intense. It is not just about one operation or one group of criminals. It is about the possibility that Casey has stepped into a conflict that will continue growing throughout the entire series. And the more dangerous these missions become, the more Casey will be forced to confront the kind of man he wants to be moving forward. Thomas Rainwater's words in the first episode still echo strongly. Casey is not just a killer, he is a protector. Episode the 2nd of May begin testing that idea in ways we have not seen before. Because when the stakes rise and the enemies become more ruthless, the real question is not just whether Casey can win these fights. The real question is whether he can continue protecting the people he cares about while walking such a dangerous path. Finally, one of the most thrilling aspects of Marshals episode 2 hinted at in the trailer is how the personal stakes for Casey and the team are about to collide with the larger criminal world. The first episode gave us a strong emotional foundation, showing how Casey is still processing Monica's death, reconnecting with Tate, and slowly forming bonds with the Marshals team. But episode 2 seems to promise that the personal and professional worlds will begin to overlap in ways that could dramatically raise the tension. The trailer gives flashes of high-speed chases, raids on drug operations, and confrontations with armed criminals, but the real suspense comes from how these dangerous situations will test the team's loyalty, judgment, and emotional resilience. It's clear that the series is moving beyond episodic conflicts, hinting at criminal organizations that are deeply rooted, well-connected, and far more dangerous than anything the Marshals have faced so far. This escalation means that Casey is no longer simply protecting people on isolated missions. He is stepping into a conflict where one misstep could have serious consequences for everyone he cares about. Another critical element the trailer hints at is how relationships within the team are likely to develop under pressure. In high-stakes operations like these, personal bonds are tested. Andrea, who already shares a quiet but significant connection with Casey, could become even more central to the story. In the first episode, she was the one Casey trusted enough to reveal that he has a child. Episode the second of May deepened that trust, showing them sharing more about their pasts, forming alliances, and perhaps even uncovering hidden layers of intelligence within the team. The tension and suspense are heightened by the sense that every interaction could have consequences in the field. Small misjudgments, unspoken secrets, or hidden emotions could create cracks in the team dynamic, and that makes the upcoming episode feel both unpredictable and deeply engaging. Similarly, Pete Calvin's backstory seems poised to play a much larger role.